beloved seekers of wisdom, dear family of dreamers and builders. There is a number that stands between you and financial freedom, a threshold, a gateway, a point of no return that separates those who will build lasting wealth from those who will forever struggle. $100,000. The first 100,000 is not just another milestone on your journey to wealth. It is the breaking point, the moment when mathematics stops working against you and finally begins working in your favor. Let me tell you something that will change how you see money forever. Most people believe wealth is built in a straight line. You save a little, it grows a little. You save more, it grows more. Simple arithmetic, linear progression. 1 + 1 = 2. They're wrong. Wealth, true wealth, is not built in straight lines. It's built in curves. Exponential curves that start so slowly, so painfully slowly, that most people give up before the magic even begins. The first $100,000 is the hardest money you will ever make. Not because the work is harder, not because the opportunities are fewer, but because the mathematics, the pure, unforgiving mathematics of compound growth, fights against you every single step of the way. Let me show you what I mean. Imagine you're 25 years old. You start investing $500 a month into a diversified portfolio. The market returns its historical average, about 10% annually. Nothing spectacular, just steady, boring, consistent growth. After 1 year, you put in $6,000. With returns, you have maybe $6,300. You worked all year, you sacrificed, you said no to things you wanted, and you have $300. After 5 years of this discipline, 5 years of consistent investing, you have approximately $38,000. 5 years, 60 months of sacrifice, and you're not even halfway to $100,000. This is where most people break. They look at their account balance and think, what's the point? At this rate, I'll never have enough. I'm working so hard for numbers that barely seem to move. They don't understand what's happening beneath the surface. They don't see that they're building the foundation, the base, the critical mass that will change everything. Because here's what happens next. After 10 years of that same $500 monthly investment, you have approximately $102,000. You've crossed the threshold. You've reached the first 100,000. And now something miraculous begins to happen. In year 11, your portfolio doesn't just grow by your contributions. It grows by the returns on 100,000. At 10%, that's $10,000 in growth just from what you've already accumulated. Your money, your past sacrifices are now working as hard as you are. By year 20, you have approximately $390,000. Notice what happened. It took 10 years to make the first 100,000. It took another 10 years to make the next 280,000. By year 30, you have 1.1 million. From 20 to 30 years, you went from 380,000 to 1.1 million. That's 730,000 in a single decade. The same monthly investment, the same returns, but radically different results. This is the secret that changes everything. The first 100 Zarlozen is your breaking point, because it's the point where compound interest stops being a theory in a textbook and becomes a force of nature in your life. But here's what nobody tells you about reaching that first 100 Zarlozen. It requires something most people don't have. Not intelligence, not luck, not even a high income. It requires the ability to delay gratification longer than your peers, to stay disciplined when you see no results, to keep investing when every fiber of your being wants to spend. Let me tell you about a young woman I once knew. We'll call her Sarah. Sarah graduated college at 23 with $35,000 in student debt and a job paying $42,000 a year. By any standard measure, she was behind. Her friends from school were traveling, buying new cars, moving into nice apartments. Sarah moved back in with her parents, drove a 15-year-old Honda, packed lunches every single day. She paid minimums on everything except her highest interest debt, which she attacked ferociously. Within 2 years, she was debt-free. Her friends were impressed briefly, then forgot about it. Because being debt-free doesn't look like success. It looks ordinary. But Sarah understood something her friends didn't. She understood that financial freedom isn't built on what you show the world. It's built on what you save from the world. She kept living like a broke college student even though she was no longer broke. Every raise she received, she invested. Every bonus invested. Every tax refund invested. Her friends thought she was cheap. Her family worried she wasn't living her life. A few boyfriends left because they wanted someone more fun. But Sarah kept going, month after month, year after year. While her friends posted vacation photos and showed off new purchases, Sarah was building something invisible. At 28 years old, 5 years after graduating, Sarah reached $100,000 in investments. She called me that day. I still remember her voice. Not excited exactly. More like relieved. Vindicated. She'd been running a race that nobody else could see, and she'd finally reached a marker that proved she hadn't been crazy. It took 5 years to get here, she told me. How long until I reached 200,000? I did the math for her. If you keep doing exactly what you've been doing about 3.5 years. There was silence on the phone. Then she said something I've never forgotten. So you're telling me it gets easier? Yes, it gets easier. Not because the work changes, but because the mathematics finally shifts in your favor. Sarah reached 200,000 at 30, and then 300,000 34. By 37, she had $500,000. By 42, she was a millionaire. The same discipline, the same lifestyle, but exponentially different results. Her friends, the ones who'd pitied her frugality in her 20s, were now asking her for financial advice in their 40s. Some of them were still paying off credit cards and car loans, still living paycheck to paycheck despite earning 6 figures. They'd made the classic mistake. They'd optimized for looking successful instead of being successful. Sarah optimized for freedom. And freedom, true financial freedom, has a price. That price is your first $100,000. But here's what makes the first 100,000 so psychologically brutal. It's not just that it takes longer to accumulate than the next 100,000. It's that you're doing it during the years when social pressure is at its peak. Your 20s and 30s. These are the years when everyone is watching, judging, comparing. You're supposed to look successful. You're supposed to have the apartment, the car, the wardrobe, the lifestyle. You're supposed to signal to the world that you've made it. But if you're serious about building wealth, you have to ignore all of that. You have to live below your means when your means are already modest. You have to say no when everyone else is saying yes. You have to be comfortable being misunderstood. This is why so few people ever reach the first 100,000. Not because they can't, but because they won't. They won't endure the social cost of discipline. I once met a man, let's call him James, who understood this principle deeply. James worked as a teacher. Made $48,000 a year in his first job. Not poverty wages, but not exactly comfortable in an expensive city. He had roommates until he was 34 years old. Not because he couldn't afford his own place, but because he chose to invest the difference. His coworkers thought he was struggling. They'd occasionally offer to help him find better opportunities, or suggest he could make more money doing something else. James would just smile and thank them. He never told them that he had over 150 Zarozen invested, that he was on track to retire at 55 if he wanted to. That their pity was based on complete misunderstanding of his situation, because James understood something profound. Wealth is invisible until it's undeniable. In your accumulation phase, in those critical years, when you're building toward your first 100,000, wealth doesn't look like anything. It sits in brokerage accounts that nobody sees. It compounds in index funds that nobody talks about at dinner parties. Real wealth whispers while poverty shouts. The person driving the luxury car might be drowning in debt. The person living in the modest apartment might be quietly building a fortune. You simply cannot tell by looking at someone's lifestyle whether they're winning or losing the financial game. This creates a dangerous illusion. The illusion that spending signals success, that consumption equals achievement, that if you're not showing your wealth, you must not have any. But the opposite is true. In the early years, the years when you're fighting toward that first 100,000, showing wealth and building wealth are mutually exclusive. You can do one or the other, not both. Every dollar you spend on looking successful is a dollar that can't compound into actual success. This is the test. This is the filter. This is what separates those who will build lasting wealth from those who will forever chase it. Can you endure looking ordinary while you're building something extraordinary? Can you drive the used car, live in the small apartment, skip the expensive vacations, and maintain your discipline year after year while your account balance crawls forward at what feels like a glacial pace? Most people can't. And that's why most people never accumulate significant wealth. They break somewhere between 0 and 100,000. They tell themselves they'll start investing more seriously later, when they're earning more. They convince themselves that they deserve to enjoy life now and save later. But later never comes, because the habits you build in your 20s and 30s, those are the habits that will define your financial life. If you're a spender now, you'll be a spender at twice the income. If you're a saver now, you'll build wealth at any income level. The first 100,000 is not just a financial milestone. It's a character test. It reveals who you truly are. It shows whether you can delay gratification, ignore social pressure, and maintain discipline in the face of nothing. No immediate results, no applause, no validation. Just the quiet knowledge that you're doing something right, even when nobody notices. And here's what makes this journey even more difficult. The world is designed to separate you from your money. Every advertisement, every social media post, every email in your inbox, they're all engineered to make you feel inadequate with what you have and desperate for what you don't. You're told you need the new phone, the streaming services, the food delivery, the upgraded lifestyle, and each purchase individually seems reasonable. It's just $20 here, $50 there, $100 for something that will make life easier. But those small leaks, those tiny compromises, they're the difference between reaching your first 100,000 in 7 years versus never reaching it at all. Let me show you the mathematics of lifestyle inflation. Imagine two people. Both start their careers at 25, earning 50,000. Both receive the same raises and promotions over the years. By 35, they're both earning 85,000. Person A increases their spending with every raise. Started spending 45,000 a year. Now spending 80,000 a year. They have the nice apartment, the good car, the impressive lifestyle. Their net worth at 35. Maybe 40,000 if they're lucky. They're still years away from that critical first 100,000. Person B kept their spending flat, still spending rough 45,000 a year, despite earning $85, invested the difference. Their net worth at 35, approximately $280, and same starting point. Same income trajectory, radically different destinations. The difference wasn't ability, it was philosophy. Person A believed they were entitled to enjoy the fruits of their raises immediately. Person B believed that raises were opportunities to accelerate wealth building. One philosophy leads to perpetual financial mediocrity. The other leads to freedom. But here's the part that breaks most people's brains. Despite having 280,000 in investments, might actually feel poorer today than person A, because they're still living on 45,000 a year while person A is living on 80,000. This is the paradox of wealth building. In the accumulation phase, being wealthy and feeling wealthy are opposites. The more you let yourself feel wealthy now, the less likely you are to actually be wealthy later. You have to choose. Comfort now or freedom later. Approval now or security later. Looking successful now or being successful later. Most people, when faced with this choice, don't consciously choose comfort and approval. They just drift into it. They tell themselves they'll get serious about saving soon. They convince themselves they're still young and have time. But time is the one ingredient you cannot buy, borrow, or manufacture. And the time you waste in your 20s and 30s, that's the most valuable time of all, because those are the years when compound interest has maximum runway to work. $1 invested at 25, assuming 10% annual returns, becomes nearly 45 by age 65. 40 years of compounding turns $1 into 45. That same dollar invested at 35. It becomes about 17 by 65, still good. But you lost 28 of potential growth by waiting 10 years. The dollar invested at 45 only becomes 6.70 by 65. Same dollar, same return. Vastly different outcomes based solely on when you started. This is why the first 100,000 is so critical. It's not just about reaching the number. It's about reaching it while you still have decades for that money to compound. A 30-year-old with a 100,000 invested will likely have over 1.7 million by 65, even if they never invest another dollar. The 100,000 they accumulated in their 20s will compound into retirement security. A 50-year-old with 100,000. That same money only grows to about 30,000 by 65. Still meaningful, but not the same life-changing trajectory. The earlier you reach that first 100,000, the more profound its impact on your entire financial life. But achieving this, reaching 100,000 in your 20s or early 30s, requires a level of discipline that feels almost superhuman in our modern consumption-obsessed culture. Let me tell you about someone who exemplified this discipline in a way that still amazes me. His name was Marcus. I met him when he was 26 years old, working as a junior accountant making $52,000 a year. Nothing special about his job or his income. What was special was his clarity. Marcus had a spreadsheet. On this spreadsheet, he'd calculated exactly how much he needed to invest each month to reach $100,000 by age 30. The number was $1,350 per month. On a $52,000 salary after taxes, that meant investing more than 40% of his take-home pay. It meant living on roughly $200 a month for everything. Rent, food, transportation, entertainment, everything. Most financial advisors would call this extreme, unsustainable. They'd tell him to live a little and aim for the standard 15% savings rate. But Marcus didn't want to be standard. He wanted to be free. And he understood that extreme discipline for 4 years would set him up for life. So he did it. He found a studio apartment in a less desirable neighborhood for $800 a month. He rode a bike to work. He cooked every meal at home. He read library books for entertainment. He socialized in ways that didn't cost money: hiking, free concerts in the park, game nights at friends' apartments. His life looked impoverished from the outside. His dating life suffered. Women weren't exactly impressed by his Spartan lifestyle. His family worried about him. His coworkers thought he was weird. But Marcus had something they didn't have. He had a plan. A clear mathematical plan with a specific endpoint. He wasn't sacrificing indefinitely. He was making a short-term trade for a long-term advantage. 4 years later, at 30 years old, Marcus had $108,000 in investments. He'd hit his goal ahead of schedule because the market had been kind, and he'd received a few modest raises that he'd invested entirely. And then something beautiful happened. Marcus didn't stop investing. He didn't suddenly start spending everything, but he did relax his extreme frugality. He moved to a better apartment. He started dating more successfully because he had the confidence that comes from knowing you're building something real. He bought some nicer clothes. He traveled occasionally. His spending increased from $200 a month to about $3,500 a month, still well below his income, but no longer painfully restrictive. But here's the key: even with this increased lifestyle, he was still investing $1 a month because his income had grown. And now, with $108,000 already working for him, the $30,000 monthly investment was being amplified by the returns on his base. By 35, Marcus had $310,000. By 40, nearly $600,000. By 45, over $1 million. The extreme sacrifice lasted 4 years. The benefits lasted a lifetime. When I last spoke with Marcus, he was 40. 8 years old, he told me something profound. Those 4 years from 26 to 30 were the hardest years of my life financially. I said no to almost everything. I felt left out constantly. I questioned whether I was making a mistake. He paused, looking out the window of his mortgage-free home. But those 4 years bought me freedom for the next 40. Everyone else my age is stressed about money, worried about retirement, trapped in jobs they hate because they need the income. I'm not. I work because I want to, not because I have to. And that difference, that's priceless. This is the secret that changes everything. The first 100,000 is not just another number on your path to wealth. It's the compression point, the pressure valve, the narrow gate that most people refuse to pass through because the passage is too uncomfortable. But on the other side of that gate, everything expands. Breathing becomes easier. Progress accelerates. The compounding that tortured you with its slowness in the early years suddenly becomes your greatest ally. You stop feeling like you're pushing a boulder uphill and start feeling like you're riding a wave. But you only get to ride that wave if you first do the work that nobody wants to do. The invisible, unglamorous, socially unrewarded work of saving aggressively when you have the least to save. Now let me tell you about the psychological shift that happens when you cross that $100,000 threshold. It's not just about the numbers. It's about what those numbers do to your relationship with money itself, with fear, with freedom, with possibility. There's a transformation that occurs, quiet but profound, when you watch your net worth cross 6 figures for the first time. You wake up one morning, check your account, and realize I have over $100,000 not borrowed, not owed to anyone, mine. For most people who reach this milestone through discipline rather than windfall, that moment is sacred. because you know with absolute certainty that you did something most people never do. You delayed gratification long enough for mathematics to shift in your favor. But the real magic isn't the number itself. It's what the number reveals about you. You prove to yourself that you can maintain discipline over years, not just days, that you can ignore social pressure and stay focused on your own path, that you can endure discomfort in pursuit of something meaningful. These qualities, discipline, focus, endurance, they don't just apply to money. They apply to everything: career, health, relationships, creativity. Any meaningful achievement requires the same fundamental capabilities. So when you reach that first 100,000, you're not just crossing a financial threshold. You're proving something about your character, about what you're capable of when you commit to something fully. Let me tell you about a couple. We'll call them Daniel and Maya. They got married at 27 and 28. Both had decent jobs, combined income of about 95,000. Nothing spectacular, but comfortable enough that they could have lived quite nicely if they'd chosen to. Instead, they made a pact. They would live on one income and invest the other entirely. For 5 years, no exception. This meant living on roughly $45,000 a year while banking $50,000. In a major city, while watching their friends buy houses, take exotic vacations, upgrade their cars, expand their families. The social pressure was intense. Daniel's parents kept asking when they'd settle down and buy a house. Maya's friends stopped inviting her to expensive dinners and weekend trips because she always said no. There were moments when they almost broke, when the one-bedroom apartment felt too small, when watching everyone else seem to enjoy life made them question whether they were being foolish. But they had each other, and they had a clear vision of what they were building. 5 years later, at 32 and 33, they had $275,000 invested. They'd blown past the $100,000 mark and kept going. And then they made a decision that surprised everyone, including me. They kept living on one income. But now, instead of investing the second income, they used it for something different. They used it for freedom. Maya quit her corporate job and started a nonprofit serving underprivileged youth. Paid herself a minimal salary. Followed her purpose instead of her paycheck. Daniel stayed in his career but negotiated for a 4-day work week. Took the pay cut. Spent Fridays with their young daughter. Their friends were baffled. You saved all that money, and now you're earning less. What was the point? But Daniel and Maya understood something their friends didn't. The point wasn't to accumulate money for its own sake. The point was to buy freedom, options, the ability to make choices based on meaning rather than necessity. Their $275,000, although invested conservatively, was generating roughly $20 a year in returns. That wasn't enough to retire on, but it was a cushion, a foundation, a safety net that made risk-taking possible. More importantly, it was still compounding. Even though they'd stopped actively contributing as aggressively, the base they'd built in those 5 years was working for them, growing, multiplying. By 40, they had 580,000. By 45, over 900,000. By 50, they crossed 1.4 million, all because of 5 years of extreme discipline in their late 20s and early 30s. 5 years of sacrifice that bought them 20-plus years of freedom. When I asked Daniel what he'd learned from the experience, he said something I've never forgotten. Most people think wealth is about having more money than you need. But real wealth is about needing less money than you have. We didn't get rich by earning more. We got free by needing less and investing the difference. This is the fundamental insight that unlocks the secret of the first 100,000. It's not primarily about earning power. It's about the gap between what you earn and what you need. And more specifically, it's about what you do with that gap. You can earn $200 a year and never reach $100 in savings if you spend $210,000. You can earn $45,000 a year and reach $100 in 5 years if you live on $30,000 and invest the rest. The number on your paycheck matters far less than the discipline in your spending. But here's where most people get stuck. They focus on increasing income without addressing the spending problem. They get raises and promotions, and mysteriously, they're still living paycheck to paycheck, just with nicer stuff. This is lifestyle inflation, and it's the silent killer of wealth building. It's why doctors and lawyers often have no more financial security than teachers and nurses. Higher income doesn't create wealth. Higher savings rate creates wealth. The first 100,000 forces you to confront this truth. because you cannot reach it through income alone. You can only reach it through discipline. And once you've built that discipline, once you've proven to yourself that you can control your spending regardless of your income, you've unlocked the code. Because now every raise, every bonus, every increase in income becomes fuel for the compounding machine you've built. Let me tell you about a man named Robert, different from the Robert I mentioned earlier. This Robert was a software engineer. Started his career at 24, making a 75 hour, good money, better than most. He could have lived very comfortably, saved a modest amount, and had a nice life. But Robert had studied mathematics. He understood compound interest not just intellectually, but viscerally. He'd run the numbers hundreds of times. He knew that the difference between saving 20% versus 40% in his 20s would be the difference between retiring at 65 versus retiring at 45. So he made a radical choice. He pretended he made 40 validot a year, lived like he was making entry-level nonprofit wages, invested everything else. In his first year, year 2 with a raise, $42,000. By year 5, he'd saved and invested $220,000. He'd blown past the first $100,000 and was accelerating toward $500,000. His coworkers thought he was crazy. Here he was, making 6 figures, living like a college student, driving a beat-up car, living with roommates, wearing the same clothes year after year. What they didn't know was that Robert was running a different race. While they were competing to look successful, he was competing to be free. At 31 years old, 7 years after starting his career, Robert had $480,000 invested. The compound growth was now generating more annual returns than he'd been able to save in his first 2 years combined. He could feel the momentum shift. It was no longer a grind. It was starting to feel inevitable. At 34, he crossed $1 million. At 36, $1.5 million. The acceleration was exponential. And at 38 years old, Robert retired. Not to a life of luxury and excess, but to a life of complete freedom. He traveled. He volunteered. He worked on passion projects that paid nothing but meant everything, his expenses. Still about $40,000 a year, the same amount he'd trained himself to live on at 24. But now, that $40,000 was being funded entirely by the returns on his investments. He wasn't spending principal. He was living off the interest. 14 years of extreme discipline bought him potentially 50, plus years of complete freedom. Every year for the rest of his life, he gets to wake up and decide what to do based purely on what he finds meaningful, not what pays the bills. That's what the first 100,000 unlocks, not immediately, not magically, but eventually, inevitably, if you have the patience to let it compound and the discipline to keep feeding it. But here's the hardest part of the journey that nobody warns you about. The first 100,000 will test not just your discipline, but your identity. Because when you choose to live below your means in a culture obsessed with consumption, you're not just making financial decisions. You're making identity decisions. You're declaring that you are different, that you value different things, that you refuse to play the game everyone else is playing. And society does not reward that choice. At least not initially. You'll be called cheap, weird, obsessed with money, missing out on life. Not living in the present. People will pity you, worry about you, try to convince you to loosen up and enjoy yourself. And there will be moments, many moments, when you wonder if they're right. When you see friends posting vacation photos and feel a pang of regret. When you walk past the car dealership and wonder what it would feel like to drive something new. When you attend a wedding and realize your outfit is 5 years old and dated. These moments are the test, not a test of your finances, a test of your conviction, a test of whether you truly believe in what you're building or whether you're just following someone else's advice without real commitment. Because if you don't have deep, personal conviction about why you're pursuing the first 100,000, you will break. Social pressure will erode your discipline. Comparison will poison your peace, and you'll end up like most people, earning decent money, spending all of it, and wondering why you never seem to get ahead. But if you have clarity, if you've really thought about what you want from life and concluded that freedom matters more than appearance, that security matters more than status, that options matter more than possessions, then the journey becomes not just bearable but meaningful. You're not sacrificing. You're investing in your future self. Every dollar you don't spend today is a dollar working to set you free tomorrow. And one day, maybe in 5 years, maybe in 10, but one day you'll wake up and realize you've crossed the threshold. You have over $100,000. The foundation is built. The flywheel is spinning. The mathematics have shifted in your favor. And all those people who thought you were crazy, some of them will start asking for advice. Because they're 40 years old and stressed about money, and you're 40 years old and calm. They're trapped and you're free. They're still grinding and you're choosing. The first $100,000 is not a destination, it's a doorway. On one side of that doorway you're pushing, straining, fighting against the gravity of a consumption culture that wants to keep you spending, borrowing, and staying exactly where you are. Every step forward feels like it requires maximum effort. The progress is slow. The rewards are invisible. The journey feels endless. But when you cross through that doorway, when you finally reach that 6-figure threshold through discipline, patience, and unwavering commitment, something shifts. The mathematics that once worked against you now work for you. The compound interest that barely registered in your early years now generates meaningful returns. The discipline that felt like sacrifice now feels like freedom. The delayed gratification finally begins to pay dividends you can see and feel. But here's the truth that transcends the numbers. The first 100,000 changes you more than it changes your bank account. It proves that you're capable of long-term thinking in a short-term world. That you can maintain conviction when everyone around you thinks you're wrong. That you can delay pleasure today for freedom tomorrow. That you have the strength to walk a different path, even when that path is lonely. These qualities, this character, this depth of discipline, they're worth more than the 100,000 itself. Because once you've built them, you can apply them to anything, any goal, any dream, any challenge. The person who can save their first 100,000 can also build a business, write a book, master a craft, transform their health, or pursue any other meaningful achievement that requires sustained effort over time. You're not just building wealth. You're building yourself. You're becoming the kind of person who finishes what they start, who keeps promises to themselves, who doesn't quit when things get hard. And that person, that version of you, is worth infinitely more than any number in a bank account. I've watched this transformation unfold hundreds of times over my decades of living and learning. I've seen people who seemed ordinary, unremarkable, transform themselves through the discipline of wealth building. And I've seen people with every advantage, intelligence, education, opportunity squander it all through lack of discipline. The difference is never circumstances. It's always character, and character is built through choices, small choices, daily choices, the choice to save instead of spend, to invest instead of consume, to delay instead of indulge, choices that nobody sees, choices that nobody applauds, choices that might even invite ridicule or pity, but choices that compound over time into a life that most people only dream about. So if you're standing at the beginning of this journey, if you're 25 or 35 or even 45 with little saved and wondering if it's possible, let me tell you with absolute certainty, it is possible, not easy, not comfortable. It's possible. Absolutely, undeniably possible. You don't need a 6-figure income. You don't need an inheritance or a win. You don't need luck or connections or special methods. You need clarity about what you want. Discipline to pursue it consistently. Patience to let time work its magic. Courage to ignore the voices external and internal and tell you to give up and join everyone else in their comfortable mediocrity. The first 100,000 is waiting for you, not somewhere far away, not in some distant future that may never come to you. Right now, at the end of a path, you start walking today. Every dollar you save is a step on that path. Every investment you make, every temptation you resist is strength building your character. And one day, perhaps sooner than you think, you look at your account and see 6 figures. You'll feel something that no purchase, no possession, no external validation can provide. You'll feel proud, genuinely proud. Not of having money, but of having become the kind of person who could accumulate. The kind of person who kept going when it was hard, who stayed disciplined when it was good, who believed in themselves when nobody else understood. That pride, that quiet, internal knowledge that you did something difficult and meaningful is the real reward. The money is just evidence. And from that foundation, from that $100,000 and the character you built earning it, you can build anything. Financial independence, generational wealth, a business, a legacy, a life of meaning and purpose. Or you can simply build peace, the peace of knowing you're secure, that you have options, that you don't have to stay in situations that diminish you because you need the paycheck, that you can make choices based on values rather than desperation. This peace, this freedom, this security, it's available to you, not through inheritance or lottery or some get-rich-quick scheme, but through the deliberate, patient, disciplined accumulation of your first $100,000. It will take longer than you want. It will be harder than you expect. You will question yourself. You will want to quit. You will watch others seem to enjoy life while you're sacrificing. But keep going. Keep saving. Keep investing. Keep building. Because on the other side of that 100,000, on the other side of the breaking point, is a life that most people never experience. A life where money stops being a source of stress and becomes a tool for freedom. Where work becomes optional rather than obligatory. Where choices are made from abundance rather than scarcity. That life is worth fighting for. Worth sacrificing for. Worth every moment of discomfort in the pursuit. And here's what I've learned in all my years of studying wealth, human nature, and the mathematics of compound growth. The people who reach financial freedom are not the smartest or the luckiest or even the highest earners. They're the ones who refused to quit, who kept putting one foot in front of the other, who trusted the process even when they couldn't yet see the results. They're the ones who understood that the first 100,000 is your breaking point, the moment when everything changes, and who were willing to do whatever it took to reach it. Be one of those people. Make that choice. Start that journey today, not tomorrow, not next month, not when circumstances are perfect. Today, because every day you delay is a day of compound growth you'll never get back. Every dollar you spend instead of invest is a future you're choosing not to live. Every excuse you accept is a door you're closing on your own freedom. You have one life, one chance to build something meaningful, one opportunity to become the person you're capable of being. Don't waste it chasing approval from people who won't remember your name in 5 years. Don't sacrifice your future for temporary comfort in the present. Don't let fear of being different keep you from becoming free. Build your first 100,000. Cross that threshold. Transform yourself in the process, and watch as the life you've dreamed about slowly, steadily, inevitably becomes the life you're living. The mathematics are on your side. Time is on your side. Compound interest is on your side. All you have to do is start and keep going, no matter what. That's the secret that changes everything. Not some complex investment strategy or hidden financial trick. Just the simple, profound truth that consistent discipline over sufficient time creates transformation. You already have everything you need, the knowledge, the ability, the opportunity. The only question is, do you have the will? I believe you do. I believe that if you've listened this far, if you've stayed with me through this entire journey, you're already different from most people. You're already seeking something more, something real, something meaningful. Now take that seeking and turn it into action. Turn it into saving. Turn it into investing. Turn it into the first step of a journey that will change your entire life. Your first 100,000 is waiting, not someday, not eventually, right now. At the end of choices you can make today, go build it. And in building it, build yourself into someone you're proud to be. That's true wealth. That's lasting success. That's the secret that changes everything. Now go, begin, and never, ever stop until you've crossed that threshold and claimed the freedom that waits on the other side. The breaking point is not where you break down. It's where you break through. Break through.